the Evolution Security Podcast. Let's take a quick break to mention Tenacor, who we're very honored to have as a sponsor of our show. They are the most innovative holster and carry solution producer in the market. Now, my current carry rig is a Glock 48 and a Cartoon 3. I also carry an extra mag and an Abdo AIWB mag pouch. And then, of course, there's the awesome Zero belt. Now, the Cartoon 3 is actually designed well for both appendix or hip inside the waistband carry. The key is the multiple ways you can adjust the camming bar, the cant, and the ride height. This allows it to be actually equally suited for both carry methods. The Abdo mag pouch is equally adjustable and thoughtfully designed. Now, the Zero belt. If you don't need a holster, at least grab a Zero belt. There is nothing like it, period. Now, I've just mentioned a few items here, but they have much, much more. And lastly, Tenacor wants you to be satisfied. If you aren't satisfied, they'll refund your money and pay to even have the product sent back to them. You can't lose, so go to Tenacor.com for carry gear that's as good as it gets.
Good evening, folks. Welcome to the EvoSec podcast. My name is Eric Davis, one half of the Tactical Twins. Aaron just had a solo episode with Lanny Basham. This time, we're going to try something a little different. I think this will be the first podcast that we've done, which essentially is a monologue on my part. So we'll see how this works. Never done it before. It may run a little bit rough, so bear with me. With that said, this is another gear and mindset show. This evening, we're going to focus on grid down scenarios and essentially emergency prep for families. Now, I thought a little bit about, why would I want to cover emergency prep? There's all kinds of awesome sources out there, way better than us. But I thought about it. I was like, well, I've done this a long time, and every time I listen to a solid show on preparation or emergency prep, I'm always reminded, man, that's something I got to make sure that I cover down on, or I'll grab my notebook here and make sure that I square that away. But essentially, I thought, well, we haven't covered this before, so we wanted to give our own take and give kind of a 20,000 foot view and just give you guys some things to think about. What precipitated this was on December 3rd here in Moore County outside of Fort Bragg, we had some folks attack our grid and 45,000 people lost power. And this carried on for about 5 days. And even though we personally, my wife and I, we were not actually without power, but a lot of good friends were without power. And, kind of personal to me, my jiu-jitsu gym didn't have power. And even though your biggest concern is for the families that are without power, and especially those that may be vulnerable, that was our biggest concern, praying for those folks and praying for the work to be done so that the power was restored was our biggest concerns. But with that said, man, it stunk not having jiu-jitsu to fall back on as again, one of our main activities. So I wanted to hit on a couple of other events. In 2003, there was in fact 8 northeastern states and the eastern bottom portion of Canada, or at least a section of it, lost power for, I believe it was 2 days. There was 55 million people without power. And as I thought about that, I was like, man, New York City being in that, or other very high population metropolitans, man, luckily it was only 2 days. Can you imagine the amount of looting and rioting that would take place if it was much beyond those 2 days? I had forgotten that had happened until I did a little bit of research. There was also an incident in California. I don't exactly recall all the details. I just know that also happened, where the grid had a similar attack where it was brought down. And just to backpedal a little bit, this 2003 incident in northeastern United States was simply some branches or a tree leaning over one single section of power, which amazed me that is what actually caused that. And I think it brings to light that our grid is very vulnerable. There was a government study in recent years that found that as little as 20 critical substations could bring down our whole grid. And man, I mean, think about that. If somebody really wanted to do serious damage, all they would have to do is coordinate bringing down 20 substations. And unfortunately, we could have, foreign actors that could try something like that. So that's something that we definitely need to get behind, is our federal government. Even though I hate, thinking about the federal government being involved in something, they're involved in too much. But I think this is an area where they actually should be involved. I think about the billions and billions of dollars being spent overseas right now, aiding in the war in Ukraine. And I'm not saying that's not important. What I'm saying is we spend billions and billions of dollars around the world, in many cases, very unworthy situations, or let's say unworthy causes, especially with all the climate BS and all that stuff. It's very illuminating that we should be using some of that money to bolster our grid, possibly pushing more towards microgrids. There's a lot of details that we could talk about, solutions, which is not the subject for this evening. But again, I'm going to include some sources in the show notes for, just some minor research that you guys can do on your own, and kind of get behind legislation that could possibly push this. So with that said, let's talk about a few areas that we can personally prepare for in case there is, social breakdown, grid down situation, or natural disasters, so on and so forth, where you may have to, survive for an extended period of time. 3 days isn't extensive, but you should at least be prepared for say 3 days. But better yet, if everybody is prepared for at least 2 weeks, we're getting in the right direction. But frankly, with the times we're in now, it may not hurt to be prepared for a more extensive either grid down or without rule of law situations. Now, I want to be careful, that we don't talk about a lot of subjects like this on this show. So I don't want people to think that, Eric is getting a little kooky here. Well, there's reality behind, what could take place in the future. We don't know if, in fact, we're going to continue to have the same kind of security that we currently have. with the current economy heading into horrible areas of inflation, the cost of goods, so on and so forth, we don't know. And not only that, let's just face it, as we've talked about on this show multiple times, is that we have politicians that don't really believe in our current Constitution and supporting our republic. So who knows? Maybe not in my lifetime, maybe not in yours, but we certainly are kind of at a precipice with what direction both, number one, our world economy is heading, and possibly where our current form of government is going. So I think it's just important that we think about those things and possibly be prepared for a little bit harder time. So it won't hurt us. And if you do take some of these steps and nothing happens, thank God it didn't happen. But you have more peace of mind, and if it doesn't happen, hey, you've got supplies that you can help other people with, which ultimately some of this is about, is being prepared to help others as well. So with that said, we're going to focus not on bugging out, which Aaron and I and Brian and all our friends around us, we have bug out bags. This is a pretty popular thing, mainly in the last decade or so. But really, those bags, I like to think they're more about get home bags, where I can try to get back to my wife and my family. Nick's on his own, our son. Excuse me. Folks on this show have heard us talk about him. He's stationed elsewhere, but who knows if anything really bad took place. Hey, I would certainly want my Marine son here helping me with security and the homestead here. So with that said, we're going to think more about bugging in, because the likelihood that you will want to leave your location is actually less desirable than folks may think. It has to be really, really bad for you to want to leave your shelter. I'm in this home here, which is quite a darn good shelter, and it's in a semi-rural area where it's away from a lot of the hustle and bustle. And even though it's a neighborhood, we live on a full acre of property, which we got plenty of room for gardening, which is one aspect of being prepared. And I've got quite a bit of wood in the back. I got plenty of firewood, frankly, for heating sources. So survival is considered in, folks have probably heard this phrase, survival's in three. For instance, you can last 3 minutes without oxygen. You can last 3 hours without shelter in harsh conditions. Of course, you can last more than 3 hours if it's not harsh conditions. You can last 3 days without water and 3 weeks without food. So we should plan accordingly. So you need to make sure you're squared away on shelter, water, and food in that order. Well, if we're bugging in, we've already got one, the most important, shelter. So, this home is like I said earlier, is a solid shelter, right? Now, it is advisable, depending on how cold it may get in your area, makes a lot of the external heating sources like a fireplace and firewood and propane heaters, all of that stuff more important. But bottom line is, even in colder temperatures, as long as you're inside and you have warm clothing, you're going to be okay. And one of the things, even in cases where we've had power outages in other areas, even up in upper state New York, with our sleeping bags and actually a duvet that we had that was, I miss that thing. We need to get another one, is a down duvet that even in, I don't know, 10 degrees at that point when the power was down. We were just fine. We were plenty warm in that particular setting. So my wife and I have the good old Army sleep system. So that we've got the black sleeping bag that is, and the green. If times get tough and you don't have any heating source, you can at least sleep comfortably if you've got some sleeping bags like that. So that's part of shelter. Now, so we've got shelter covered. So what's next? We need to cover water, right? At a minimum, all of this is just gradual. So if you have not done any preparation yourself, just start one little thing at a time. When you go to the store, grab a couple of gallon jugs of water and put them in a pantry. We actually have a closet that's upstairs. It's just down the hall from me here, which is our main, lack of a better term, preparation closet. And even though most of our water is stored downstairs because of how much we actually have stored, that's a start for some folks. But having a closet like that you can just start putting gallon jugs of water in it will be an excellent start. Now, upgrading from there, I personally like 5-gallon jugs, and there's all kinds of sources out there. So I've got a couple examples here. So this is an actual jug. I think I found, I don't know, maybe 5 or so of these on sale at, I'm trying to remember what store that was. It was a Bass Pro maybe, or I can't remember exactly where. It was a Bass Pro or something like it. And I found these on sale, and I grabbed them up. Here's another example, and this is a good old surplus Army water jug. So this is another good source, and I've got, I don't know, maybe 10 of these. So that's a couple examples of 5-gallon jugs that are just real solid. You can hold a lot of water in those. And to digress a second, you got to consider this. You need about a gallon a day per person to live extensively. So what does that mean? You need water for drinking. You also need water for cleaning, hygiene, so on and so forth. So that gallon of water isn't just for drinking. You're having to account for your hygiene needs as well. And if you want to graduate up from there, I like 55-gallon food storage barrels, which is I've got one of those downstairs, and I'm about to add an additional one. I also have a 30-gallon as well. Now, that brings me to one of the biggest concerns about storing water. You can't just out of your tap, store water and believe that it's good. Over time, different microbes and other sources can actually spoil that water. So you need to have some form of water stabilization. And to this point, I've used a company called Water Preserver. And let's see if I can get that into focus. And effectively, this is just a concentrated bleach solution that the droplet, if you pour the whole thing in a 55-gallon drum, which is what it's based off of, it'll preserve that whole 55-gallon, the 55-gallon barrel for 5 years. It will also, depending on the calculations, like if you need to preserve a gallon or preserve 5 gallons, so on and so forth, that it has calculations for how many drops that you need to preserve that water. Now, there's another source that I found that I have not actually tried out, and I think it's called Water Rescue or H2O Rescue. Yeah, that's what it is here in my notes, which a lot of this, a good bulk of all this discussion is going to be in the show notes. So yeah, this H2O Rescue is another type of 5-year preserving substance that I'm actually going to check out myself. So you need to make sure that you have that. So we've covered water and some food food grade storage, very important for what containers that you get. But again, 5-gallon, 1-gallon jugs, 55-gallon, 30-gallon barrels, all great places to store water. Now, with that also being said, we have ways to gather rainwater here as well. Or there's some sources down the street, some ponds and some creeks. Now you're going to need filtration for that, but for the sake of this discussion, we won't hit on filtration just yet. Next, we need food. So as a start, again, one step at a time, I brought out some of the stuff that I have stored in the closet. And just a few items here. Just very simple. Grabbing extra cans of vegetables, cans of chicken, even good old luncheon meat. Not all this is healthy. I'm not saying or arguing that this stuff is perfectly healthy, but in hard times, you're going to be very thankful for this food if it's needed. Yeah, I think I mentioned tuna. I got tuna packages. So I just store a bunch of cans of chicken and tuna, and a lot of cans of vegetables, so on and so forth. So again, when you're going to the store, every trip or every other trip, maybe once a month, just grab some extra cans. If you're buying 1 can of carrots, buy 2 and store 1 of them, right? Just as simple as that. I know it's not like that's rocket science, but if folks aren't thinking about that, then it may help to just be reminded. Just buy 2, store 1, and you can do that every trip for a while. And I know times are tough right now, so you can do as much as you can, and just accumulate. This is one step at a time. Another thing I like to do, and this is in fact my favorite type of freeze-dried food, is these Mountain House meals. My son and I have used these for years on the trail, and just overall they're delicious. I think one of my favorites is the chili mac. That's one of my favorites, even though I don't eat a whole lot of pasta most of the time. You're looking for quite a bit of calories. So in this case, pasta's going to be in. Here is a bucket full of those Mountain House meals. Again, if you're just, adding to your stores, go on. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Amazon, but if that's your thing, I use it as well. You can go and grab a bucket of these, every month or so, or every couple of months. They're a little bit expensive, but again, having these freeze-dried foods is going to be real useful in tough times. Now, graduating from that, grab one of these from outside in the garage. And let me get this. This is a bucket of pinto beans that I've stored in a Mylar bag and in a food-safe 5-gallon bucket, which you can, some folks go out, I've done this before, and as a matter of fact, that bucket may be one. of the buckets I got from a baker at some point. They, have all these food safe buckets that they've had, icing or what have you in that you can clean out. Or you can simply, over time just order some food safe buckets off Amazon or any source that you find online. The good thing about those types of storage methods is conservatively they should last 10 years. Now there's arguments that they last a lot longer. Personally, I try to base it off of that 10-year mark. And just be mindful, I didn't say this earlier, the Mylar bag, you seal it, but you seal it with an oxygen absorber. And again, depending on the size of the bag, the manufacturer of the oxygen absorber will state how many you need to put in there. So that's what I've done with, I don't know how many buckets I have. I should know. I have an inventory, but it's a good 10 buckets worth of dry goods, rice, beans, certain spices. I put spices all throughout each one of the buckets because you're definitely going to want spices in tough times because you want the stuff to taste good, and let's face it, you're going to be bartering in long-term possible survival situations. So having extra spices, just like centuries ago, spices were a big thing. So having extra isn't going to hurt. So that kind of covers some food. Oh, I also brought this out. Both the Mountain House meal I grabbed earlier and also this. These are boat rations, which I think they have a 10-year shelf life. I've had these a while. I'll put that in the show notes. But these are some high caloric. I call them cookies. They taste pretty darn good in my opinion. But for what you get calorically, this is a lot in this small package here. So that's another example of some food. I think that covers the basics of food. Now, you're going to want to be able to prepare that food. Now, if it's just short term and you don't have a stove, or like in my case, a grill is a big part of my preparation. I store extra bottles of propane because propane is you can store propane nearly indefinitely. You just have to maintain the bottle. So I think bottles have to be checked out every 10 or 12 years, something like that. But if you're storing it for yourself, that doesn't necessarily matter. Just make sure that the O-rings are not dried or dry rotted, so that you can use it when you need it. If you don't have that, you can start simply by buying this ISOPRO type fuel. And this stuff, I've got a ton of these stored, using these for both hiking and camping, and just having these as a source for emergencies is a solid choice. I've got a MSR stove here. And man, this sucker boils water extremely fast. Of course you fix it to the can here, and then this is in fact your heating vessel. Your pot. Do a lot of cooking in here, or just boiling water for your Mountain House meal, so on and so forth. So this stove is real solid. Lots of hours with that stove. But now one of my lighter choices here, and I'm going to be straight. This is something I discovered. It's an inexpensive, and it's probably Chinese made. Sometimes I compromise there, like everybody else. And the company is BRS. And again, I'll try to put this in the show notes, but this makes this a lot more compact. Let me put it on here like this so you can see when this affixes to your fuel source becomes your actual stove. So that's another thing that you could have, if you don't have, again, a grill or something that you can cook outside, and you have, let's say you have an electric stove, you're going to need something to cook with. So this is another option. All right, so we've covered your shelter being your home, your water, and your food. Now let's talk a little bit about the fact that over time, security is going to become an issue. If it's only a week or two, there's probably not going to be any issues depending on where you are. There's a big difference between being here in rural North Carolina versus being in Chicago or New York City. It's going to get exponentially worse in these bigger cities if you, for instance, live in those types of areas. And those may be some locations where your best bet is to have a designated friend or family member that you might want to, consider getting to their location. But if you're not, then again, after about, I would say, 2 weeks, you're going to start having some problems with looting and probably folks driving around looking for sources of things and goods. Because I think after that 2-week mark, people are going to start getting a little bit crazy. So you're going to start needing to consider security plans. Now, I think it's real crucial that in a long term, without rule of law, to use one of those terms out there, is that you're going to have 24/7 security. So it's going to be real important for you to know your neighbors, and it's best to start now. Get to know your neighbors. I've got some buddies that are here on my street. Let's just put it this way: I've got at least 5 special forces, either current or retired, that are right here on my street. And with a few of them, we have a loose agreement that if things got tough, we're certainly going to team up and help each other out. And that's the instance where your 24/7 security, you're going to have some kind of rotating guard shift, whatever that looks like. For those of us that were in the military, we understand that that's just part of duties. But if you're not used to this type of thought process, then that's something you're really going to have to consider. At a minimum, folks are going to have to stay up throughout the night and watch over your house, watch over, and not necessarily just your stuff, but so. These are situations where if time does go by without power in, say, a grid down or even worse, economic breakdown, you're going to definitely need a community of people, at least within your neighborhood or close to you, that you guys can help each other out. I mean, go figure. You might even have a doctor that lives in your neighborhood, or a plumber, somebody that understands, basic handyman. All of us should be decent handyman, handy woman around the house. But, you got people that are probably close to you that have skills much better than yours in certain areas. So that's when that starts to become real important under long-term either survival or grid down situations. So get to know your neighbors. It's going to be really important in that case. Now we covered food. Now let's talk about you're definitely going to want to make sure that you have first aid. I know it goes without saying. It's pretty popular right now that folks within this community are solid on, at least having trauma medicine gear, but and also getting training. I mean, it's pretty popular amongst our groups, at least, that have at least some TCCC or how to run a tourniquet, how to run a chest seal, pressure dressing, so on and so forth. But if you don't have training in that area, it's probably a good time to try to square that away. All that said, you're going to need basic first aid more than you're going to need trauma in most cases. So we're talking basic bandaging, antibiotic creams, burn bandages, basic meds, ibuprofen, Tylenol, antidiarrheal, all of those, allergy medicines, things like that are going to become, real important if you're in an extended time without power. So, plus those up in your stores. Of course, it goes without saying, you need to have some flashlights and extra batteries. You need to store extra batteries. I like my rechargeable batteries. I've got extra batteries for my 1,000 lumen flashlight here, and I've got multiples. Again, just the old adage, one is none, two is one. You guys have heard that, so have extras. My wife's got one similar to this. And then we've got extra batteries, and we've got ways to charge them. All of our basic devices, I've got a solar panel that will charge 12-volt batteries, and I've got an inverter that can provide 5-volt recharging sources. So, that's something that you may want to consider as well. So, another excellent thing that we have stored is tea lights. You can go and for about $15 get 100 tea lights, and they're the little small white candles in tin that, they burn for an extensive period of time. I think they'll burn around 4 hours. And so for $15, you can get 100 of those. Man, it's an excellent source of both light, and you can also cook with them. It's going to take a little longer than say the MSR, but you can still cook with those. So that's a good thing to store. Now, I, for one, we've got a few light-powered, lack of a better term, lamps that we have here around the house. But something that I have on my future prep notes here is I want to start picking up some of the Lucy lights, which are the rechargeable inflatable lights that compact down real small, and then you inflate them and they become a small lamp using LEDs, but also they're solar rechargeable, and you can also, which I'm going to leave a link in the show notes, is also recharge cell phones with them as well. So let's consider long term. You've got, maybe 5 of those Lucy lamps around the house, and you just make sure that you recharge them each day when there's sun out. And man, you've got a pretty extensive length of light that's pretty inexpensive. And I'm thinking, depending on what type you get, somewhere around $18 to $25. I think that the rechargeable, the one that can recharge phones, is around $25, $27. So, in my opinion, well worth it. And then we're going to start investing in those. I forgot to mention our main lamp source that we have stored for long term is kerosene lamps. And we've got quite a bit of kerosene stored, and those work well. But again, you need ventilation, for those as well. So that's why I'm kind of keen on those Lucy lights now. So let's see here. Looking at my notes, another thing you absolutely need to have a means to start a fire. So I mean, you can go to Walmart and pick up a pack of 10 Bic lighters, fairly expensive. Which I think we've got a couple of those packages sitting around here at the house. Stockpile matches. Matches last, in a dry space. They're lasting a long time, if not close to indefinite, if you keep them in a dry place. So store up matches, and those what do they call them? Duralogs, I think they are, storing the logs that aid you in starting fire. Either in your fireplace or if you get to start a quick fire, out in your grass and in a safe area that you've designated so you can warm the family up. You're going to want that capability. Always need fire. So in those cases, make sure that you have those. Now, I already mentioned earlier having a way to cook. I also mentioned my propane grill, that is going to be one of the main ways that we would cook food, in this type of situation. And again, storing additional bottles of propane, which we do have. And one of my future prep notes is I want to get one of the 100-gallon propane tanks. So have that in stores here at the house. So, and the cool thing about the grill is you can use whatever your regular pots and pans that you have around the house. It's a lot more comfortable. You don't have to use your camping gear to do most of your cooking. It feels a lot like normal cooking. So that's another positive of using say a propane grill, or even like a Coleman camping stove, which we used to have. I don't know if we still have it. If it's still around here, I'll have to look. We've got quite a bit of Coleman fuel and Coleman propane stored as well. So that's something I need to. We just moved here about a year and a half ago, and I can't think that I've seen that Coleman stove, which would be unfortunate if for some reason we either misplaced it or it got thrown away somehow. I don't know why that'd be the case, but so we've covered cooking, a couple of different ways to store camping fuel, so on and so forth. Let's see here. Moving on. Checking my notes. Oh, yeah. Huge area here. So even only just a few days, you're going to want to have ways to maintain hygiene, right? Staying clean and staying healthy, keeping away, the germs and whatnot. So I suggest storing, you go and grab, I didn't bring any in here, I should have, is those Lysol wipes or Clorox wipes. Man, those are awesome because, you just pull them out and it's got a towel with a solution on it. Those are excellent for times like this. Have plenty of towels that you can also wash. Again, water's going to be scarce in long term, but you're still going to want to have, the capabilities to be able to wash towels as well. I mean, it's going to be paramount that you have the capabilities to keep everything clean and yourself clean. It's going to be very smart, again, doing like we talked about with the canned goods, is making sure that you're grabbing extra toilet paper and extra hygiene items, feminine hygiene items, when you're going to the store. You don't have to buy, like hoard it, but, every now and then you need to be grabbing extra toilet paper and hygiene items and storing them, because again, this relates to making sure that you're staying healthy in long-term survival situations. So again, we covered the wipes, we covered, store extra toothpaste and extra toothbrushes. Again, boy, one of the toughest things to deal with in a survival situation is dental issues. Again, I've heard it said, and our good buddy Sherman House, being a dentist, he can add a lot to this, but folks' health is directly related to dental health. So making sure you keep your teeth flossed and keep an extra toothbrush, toothpaste around for these times is going to be crucial. Store extra bleach, bottles of bleach. Now, I want to make some clarification here. You can use regular bleach in a pinch for purifying water, but it's not really recommended. If you have to, it's better than nothing. It's better than nothing at all. But again, it's best to use actual water purification type drops. So keep that in mind. In a pinch, you can certainly use it, but again, these bottles of bleach are what are going to help you, stay clean and keep your house clean. So store extra bleach. So we covered neighbors, getting to know your neighbors. Something that's going to become common in long-term time without power and or without rule of law is bartering is going to become popular again. So think of a lot of the things that you're storing may end up being a bartering capability. Hey, if you like storing, alcohol, maybe that's a good bartering tool. That to me wouldn't be as big of a deal in tough times. Maybe having a bottle of something wouldn't hurt, but a lot of other folks believe that storing, alcohol is good currency, and I agree with them. So that's probably a good reason to store and stock up on a few bottles of the good stuff. I suppose wouldn't hurt for bartering. So I breezed through earlier. I got a couple of alibis here. I kind of breezed over some of the sanitation concerns, and one crucial area is dealing without having running water and toilets. Keeping healthy and safe from germs and viruses is making sure that you have a way of dealing with going to the bathroom. So I recommend one of those, at a minimum, 5-gallon buckets that have a toilet seat, and they have biodegradable bags. I mean, you can probably pick up a full system for $25. So that's a good thing to have in your preparation. Secondly, there are a ton of YouTube videos and directions out there on how to build outhouses. So long term, that's going to be at least a option for you is building a good old school outhouse. I also recommend picking up the good old Army FM 21-10, I think it is, the Field Sanitation field manual. Has some real good multiple recommendations and methods of dealing with field sanitation, dealing with trash, dealing with bathrooms. All of that good stuff is in there, and I'll try to put that manual in the show notes as well. One of the other things that I meant to mention earlier is, when you're eating a lot of some of this freeze-dried food, canned foods, stuff that's, preserved long-term, they don't have all of the best nutrients left in them. So I really recommend storing some kind of greens powder. And, of course, we love, and a little bit of shameless product plug here, is the Jocko greens. Of course, Origin and Jocko Fuel is one of our sponsors. So this is the best tasting green drink that I've ever had. I've also used Organifi, which is pretty tasty. There was another one that I had that just tasted horrible. Organifi tastes good, but this tastes way better. So this is going to help you with nutrients that you're not getting from having your normal sources of, grown vegetables and things of that nature if you don't have a garden set up yet. So, really consider stocking up on Jocko Greens or Organifi or something of the sort. Another thing that I did not mention earlier is over the years, just because of either financial concerns or how important it has been to me over the years is I don't have a generator yet. Incidentally, in the last 24 hours, I purchased a generator. So that's something that you can also consider. It's not a must if you prep the way that we've been discussing this particular show. But, if you're looking at long term and you can invest in a generator and can invest in plenty of extra fuel, that's something that you may also consider. Let's just summarize with saying that if you don't have anything, just start. And that just starts with grabbing some jugs of water, cases of water. Now, be mindful, all that has to be rotated out over time. I'm not going to put a timeline on when that water may need to be rotated, but you need to consider that. That's why I like these storage capabilities, the 5-gallon, the 30, the 55-gallon storage sources as what we go to around here. But just start with grabbing jugs of water. Start with grabbing extra cans of food, extra cans of chicken, extra spices, grabbing just a few extra salt and pepper, McCormick type grilling spices, all that stuff, chili powder, cumin, onion powder, grabbing a lot of that extra stuff and storing it, you're going to be much better off, just starting there. Once a payday, grab another 5-gallon jug. Grab some of the water purification that I'm suggesting and we'll have in the show notes. Talk to your neighbors. Really think about this as a long-term strategy. You don't have to have everything overnight. Just start. And the Red Cross, and I'm gonna put this Red Cross source in the notes as well, actually has a darn good source for emergency kits. And I think I had it printed up here, and I'm not going to go over it, but they have a pretty darn extensive list for survival kits, and what you should have. And it discusses a lot of what we've discussed already, but I'm going to put that in the show notes. So if you want to have a list to go by, if this is new to you, that's a superb source. Now, I should digress that you should have some battery powered radio so that you can listen in on possible news and weather, so on and so forth. Of course, I breezed over that because we've already had an emergency comms prep, which I'm looking at some of my ham radios here, which I have, my ham radios can pick up any type of station. I've got antennas that will feed basic FM stations and AM stations as well as my HF and UHF, VHF capabilities. So with that said, I've talked on quite a bit here about these things. I did have some politics that I was thinking about covering, but you know what? I think honestly, I think I'm going to call it because I'm feeling pretty good about the content here, and I want to keep this less negative, because some of the politics we'll probably cover next time. The CDC deleting defensive use. That was going to be something I was going to talk about, but we'll just leave it at this tonight. I really appreciate you guys listening in to me ramble, and hopefully it wasn't a ramble fest, but we really appreciate your time. Please go out and share our show. Go on YouTube. That's new for us. Subscribe to our YouTube. I'm going to put this, of course, on YouTube. And, rate us if you don't mind. And also patronize our sponsors, Tenacor, Origin, our two main sponsors. You can go to the links in the show notes. It helps us greatly. And again, we want to help those folks out because they help us. With that said, you guys have a great evening, and we'll see you next time.